Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the weekly M3 market update. I'm hoping that this show becomes sort of the place you visit every week to get your updates on housing and commercial real estate. And even if you do your own research to learn about things maybe you weren't thinking about when looking at the housing market. Because as I argue in my Substack piece this week, the way we look at housing, I believe, should be very different. And maybe this is the way we always should have looked at it. But I think certain themes are materializing that are giving us a different view and perspective that we need to be aware of. And that's what I talk about here. So had some technical difficulties with my mic, so apologies for this week. The sound might be a little poor, but next week everything should be back up and running. Okay, so introduction. This week on the Substack, I wrote an article or a long post called Built to Ruin, an American Odyssey. Built to Ruin is a play off Built to Rent, and many of you may not have even heard of this phenomenon, but essentially what it is that when rent started to kind of skyrocket as affordability became constrained and certain inventory was constrained, people started really piling into the built to rent space. At the tail end of 2012, there were a lot of investors that got involved in picking up the pieces from the GFC and went out there and bought at auction a ton of properties. And they sort of partnered with the GSCs, Fannie, Freddie, etc., who were then the ones marketing those properties to take those properties, scoop them up, and then sort of rent them in mass. And so there are a lot of companies that got into this, like Invitation Homes, American for Rent, Premium, First Key, which is a Cerberus company. So these are all different companies that kind of latched on to the idea of, let me buy these single family rental or single family homes, and I'm going to rent them out as long-term rental. So this phenomenon really started picking up steam. It was in full force before we got any of the fiscal and monetary stimulus. And so it essentially went on steroids. And that is definitely what I am starting to see in the industry. We're starting to uncover fraud from that 2019, early 2020 period in this space. And so I do believe we're going to see a lot more of this. And so why do I call it Built to Ruin? Well, I didn't come up with that term. One of my friends from the building community did, because just as with every great boom, there are people that get in early and do well, and they're the ones we're all, a little jealous of. And then there are the ones that essentially get in and it's too late. And so what's happening right now is that, as folks were kind of realizing, seeing the writing on the wall, and pivoting to build to rent because the builders could see this as well. Everybody started piling in, and they kind of overbuilt for build to rent. So if you think about it, this is kind of confusing. But in terms of the inventory story, let's just kind of do a rehash of the themes. So we have all the short-term rental from the Airbnb passive income craze, and that isn't just people going out and buying existing homes. That was people that also worked with private builders to build homes specifically for this. And so Sevierville, Pigeon Forge, areas like that in Tennessee, for instance, are big hubs of these, where these listings never made it to the MLS, which is the listing site that feeds things like Realtor, Zillow, and Redfin. So this is that's a whole slew of inventory that never made it to the numbers that would get reported for inventory to the Fed. Okay, so then you basically had all this multifamily because people started to see, rents are increasing. So people started, and they thought that it was constrained supply. And so again, as people came in after everyone else, the last ones in the door, they started filing these permits and building this multifamily in mass. It highest amount of multifamily since the 70s, and our demographic picture has changed very significantly. Okay, so then you had folks that are like, hey, there's not enough existing supply out there. We see that the housing market is cooling. Let's build homes just to rent out. Since, according to a recent Redfin study, there are only basically 4 places in the U.S. where it makes sense to own rather than rent from a pure financial perspective, which is very different from the narrative I heard growing up. And so everybody kind of piled in and wanted to build specifically to rent the homes, so that's another group of homes with the short-term rentals that never made it to listing sites for sale. But what you have now is that some of the smarter institutional investors have started selling those properties because they are as well encountering some headwinds from right now, I would say it's a cost of funds perspective. And so in the Substack, I link an incredible for guidance, or actually, yes, with Jack Farley and Randy Woodard and John Tuig. And I highly recommend you guys listen to this because it is all about, people think the credit crunch has already happened, but if you listen to these 2 bank experts, they think that we really haven't seen anything yet. And so want to really encourage you guys to check out that podcast. It was fantastic. So there's a very complicated picture when it comes to inventory. And so you hear people out there, specific publications talking about constrained inventory. What I would encourage everybody to do is start asking questions back. What do you mean by inventory? And if there's no physical person to ask me. Ask me what Zillow thinks is inventory versus Realtor versus Redfin, and I can tell you a couple of different things that each of the sites do differently. Additionally, there are companies out there that don't even that actually act like they're the premier collector of inventory in the industry, and they don't even include new builds. And so inventory is being used by many different people in the industry in many different ways. And so you can find yourself in an argument when in reality you might not need to be. So it's important to kind of define those terms and understand what people mean by inventory. But the idea of built to ruin is that these investors, which by the way, many of us may have even invested in some of these companies, but these investors went out, bought all these homes essentially, and realized, they can make a lot of money on this. And so now, though, as they see that with all the multifamily coming online, this is no longer the smart play. We have already started to see rents cool. I posted that article in the Substack as well for you to check out. And in my own work last month, I saw rents decrease about 1% in the 60 plus cities that I track. So rents are definitely coming down. And as that multifamily hits the market, and as more of this built to rent hits the market in places like Phoenix, they have massive subdivisions of this, then you're going to start to see pressure on rents. And when you get pressure on rents, that's pressure on the investors that own these properties, who are also getting pressure from increased cost of funds or an increased amount that they have to pay for their borrowings. And so you can see how this is a storm that is brewing, and there's a few different places where the fires are, and pretty soon it's going to come together. And so hopefully what I'm doing here for you each week is giving you a view of a location near you and giving you things to think about in terms of how this may impact you and your home equity, your loan to value, and or any decisions you were thinking about making about purchasing a home to live in or purchasing a home as an investment property. So my biggest message for this week is I don't want any of my viewers having to contemplate ruin in the next couple years because they weren't thinking about these themes. I personally feel like it's disingenuous for the dancing bears to go out screaming about inventory without mentioning some of these caveats. You know, if I want to be completely fair to those guys, you know, it's not something that we typically think about, but I argue that we should. And at this point in time, you know, that if they're ignoring it, I think that is kind of dangerous. So, okay, welcome to the show. I might run through this a little faster today just because of all the technical difficulties. So bear with me, and I'll be looking at updates below as opposed to up on my screen. But top cities with largest percent increase in inventory week over week this week. Rochester was up again at 7%. This is their second week in a row at #1. So if anybody knows what's going on in Rochester, please reach out to me. Let me know. I'm very curious about this as well. Salt Lake City was up around 5.46%. Rosemary Beach up at 4.35%. This is on 30A close to Panama City and Destin. This is a desired spot for many vacationers. Bozeman up at 4%. So I mentioned Bozeman last week. I showed you a video. For weeks, I had been hearing about inventory increases in Bozeman. You know, this new build community where you can see this video. And now we're starting to really see it in the data that we're tracking. Okay. Bakersfield up at 3.82%. So again, we only have one California city in the top 5. I find that rather interesting, and it seems to be dispersed. Okay, top cities with largest percent increase in inventory from start. None of the order changed this week, so I'm just going to run down these really quickly. San Ramon up around 82%, San Francisco 79%. Coeur d'Alene 77.72%, Denver around 57%, Austin around 50%, San Jose at 45%, Boston at 43%, Galveston, Texas at 40%, and Seattle around 37.41%, and Portland around 37%. So we've got kind of a good top 10 here to be tracking. And as you can see that there's cities all over the country. So it's the West Coast, but then we have problem area in Boston. We talked a little bit about that last week. Then you have Austin and Galveston, and then you also have Seattle and Portland and Salt Lake City and Coeur d'Alene on here. So we're getting kind of a wide swath in this top 10. So all eyes on these markets as well as the ones that start kind of where we start seeing the same behavior, because in 50 of the 63 cities that I track, we had increases in inventory. It was around 1.44% month over month. And so that's, you know, that's a pretty big, I'm sorry, week over week. That's the largest jump I've seen, as well as the largest majority of cities having increases in listings. And this isn't all seasonal based on some of the other factors and sales that I'm seeing. So this is where the rubber hits the road, and all this work that I've been doing to track this stuff up until now gives us a good foundation as we start to see distress, I believe, and properties coming onto the market because of that distress. Okay, rent. So I'm kind of excited about this, but also a little annoyed with myself. I didn't think about it before. So what I added for rent, so we're in the middle of the month with Real Pages. We don't get a lot of rent movement in the middle of the month. But last couple weeks, I've been tracking single family rentals from Realtor.com and how many in each of these cities. And so already seeing some really interesting correlations that I'm not ready to talk about completely yet, but correlations from listings for sale and drops or increases in listings for rent. So this is an important one. Again, a little mad at myself. I haven't been tracking this longer, but that's okay. Okay, so top cities with the highest percent increase of single family rental listings. So Cape May up at 50%, Sedona at 24%, San Ramon at 21%, Augusta at 19.81%, Bozeman at 19.62%. So not going to say a lot now, but very interesting to look at these in relation to listings for sale. And then the top cities with the highest percent decrease of single family rental listings. Now I think this is really important. Again, I have kind of a working theory on this, and it might be related to people selling and then moving to rent, but we will see. Okay, so Johnson City was down at 7.30%. Sevierville, this is a huge a short-term rental city that I wanted to track on purpose. Almost down 7% in terms of rental listings. This isn't price, so just want to make sure everybody understands. Costa Mesa down at 4.4%. Asheville down at negative 4.2%, and Oceanside down at negative 4%. So these again are cities with decrease of single family rental listings, meaning less rental single family homes listed for rent. Okay, so Airbnb. So in the Substack, I attached a picture of some Facebook message boards and people sort of lamenting the fact that it's very slow. They're not getting bookings. In fact, one person in the group, and you can see it on the Substack, said this is the worst they've seen it in 12 years. And then someone else chimed in about, well, you know, we've got all these new properties, and you do. And this has ultimately been what I've argued about Airbnb from the beginning. I believe that there is a market for short-term rental. I really do. But when Airbnb's only business strategy is to add more homes, ultimately you get to a point where the markets are oversaturated, and then you dilute the earning potential for your clients. And I've never understood that business model. I thought for sure they would come up with something else that would sort of, you know, diversify their revenue, but they really haven't. So okay, top cities with, sorry, let me just say that I think that Airbnb is a key to a lot of this. Just as kind of the institutional investors are a key as well, and the mom and pop that bought to list for rental, but the short-term rental is a big piece of the story. You can't go, you know, so let's take an example, Austin. Which had about 18,000 Airbnbs listed at the beginning of the year, went down to about 14,000. Okay, interestingly, in that city, we have had listings for sale increase by almost 50%. So those are the types of correlations that we want to track here. So you have to think about today in the world, we have about 800,000 hotels. We have about 6 million Airbnbs. At the end of the day, how much stock do we truly need for kind of, you know, the amount of vacation and travel that we are going to see in the next 3 to 5 years? And I think that is a big question a lot of folks aren't answering. And I think even people like Hilton, for instance, are coming after Airbnb. Like they're realizing that these guys have kind of, they've gotten an easy pass. And so they're coming out with their own products, which more of a long-term stay, not residence in, like more apartment-like. And I do believe that the gloves are coming off and we're going to start to see more competitors in this space. Okay. So top cities with Airbnb average price decreases week over week, and starting this week, I'm going to be comparing this to their averages, and so we'll do 4-week averages, we'll do longer averages, but this is compared to their 4-week average right now. So Tucson is down 66%, Indianapolis down 35%, Miami down 33%, Orlando down 31%, Salt Lake down 30%. Again, week over week decreases in Airbnb prices, the average 4-week price. And then here we have top cities with Airbnb average price increases week over week compared to the 4-week average. Here that's Oceanside at 67%, Rosemary Beach up at 63%, Hoboken around 57%, Carlsbad up around 55%, and Austin around 39%. So very interesting to see Austin shoot up there. Very curious about what's going on there at the moment and how that compares to the average. So we'll be keeping our eyes on that. And then finally, commercial real estate. Every day it feels like we're getting a new announcement about a big property either handing the keys back to the lender or going into special servicing, and that's servicing for defaulted loans. Very recently, there's a mall in San Francisco, the Nordstroms had left. This is, you know, you can almost feel like, okay, it's just San Francisco again, but you know, San Francisco is a really important city in our country. As much, whatever we may all think about it, to see a city like this suffer. Let me just put it this way, guys. I know a lot of people think it has to do with the politics, and that may be true, but no one wants to see one of our cities fall like this. And if it can happen in one, it can happen in others. And so important to watch what's going on out there. So lots going on in commercial real estate that it's hard to kind of keep track. I'm trying to build some metrics in the background here and hope to have something for you soon and do some deep dives as well in the next month or so. But for commercial real estate this week, I would say apart from these, you know, eye-catching headlines, this podcast with John Twig and Randy Woodard and Jack Farley is just absolutely incredible. If you know, if you want to know where we're headed, and understand that the banking crisis is not over, and you know the lending pullback could have serious ramifications for our economy. So I encourage you guys to check that out. They have some great phrases in there. One of the things they say is that commercial real estate right now, the only thing that's trading is trash and trophies, and love it, love it. My Southern self loves that. So that'll probably be the name of my Substack next week. So again, apologies for not having a great mic and the technical difficulties. Before I close today, I want to give a quick shout out. Someone I know has a big race this weekend, so and I wish them luck, even though they don't need it. And so thanks guys for joining. You can reach me at m3_melody on Twitter, on LinkedIn at Melody Wright, on Substack at m3melody Substack, and then here on YouTube. Hopefully next week all technical difficulties will be rectified. Thank you for joining me today, and as always, please reach out with any questions. Thank you.